On this episode of EcoSense for Living, we focus on clean water, we look at obstacles.
How can something be toxic in one place and non-toxic in another place?
And we look at creative solutions.
And they said, we're open to ideas. And I said, okay, I'll come up with one.
Coal ash pollution is not just a problem because it exists, it's also a problem because of the way it's managed. Can you tell us what coal ash pollution is and why it's a reason for concern?
When you burn coal to generate electricity, you need two things, coal and water, because you produce steam. So all these plants are built near a water supply, a river or a lake.
When power is made to light this room and to light most houses in the United States, a lot of that power comes from burning coal, unfortunately, still to this day. When coal is burned, there's leftover ash, the stuff that, like in the ash at the bottom of your fireplace.
It's really hard to believe this, but it is true, is that our utilities across the Southeast and in other parts of the country have taken millions of tons of industrial waste, coal ash, and put them in large, unlined pits right next to our rivers, lakes, and drinking water reservoirs. Those pits are often in the groundwater, but they also fill them with water. And those pits and those millions of tons of ash are held back from our rivers, lakes, and drinking water reservoirs only by dikes made of earth that leak.
Specifically, what toxins are in coal ash and how does that affect people's health?
We've seen a lot of different pollutants emerge as we've learned more and more about coal ash. One we have known about for a long time is arsenic.
Unfortunately, that ash concentrates the heavy metals, things like arsenic, cadmium, molybdenum, a variety of heavy metals, some of which can be quite toxic.
When something gets burned, it's actually the toxins intensify, and toxins that weren't even there in its original form are there once in the burning process.
The power plants that burn that coal need to get rid of that coal ash. So rather than disposing of it in a safe lined landfill in a safe location, very often it's just piled up in huge piles or it's dumped somewhere. Disposal of coal ash is very poorly regulated. Some states are more aggressive than other states in regulating it. Federal EPA, unfortunately, has been quite lax in controlling it, and a lot of states basically just shrug their shoulders and let the folks dispose of it as they will.
Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a chemist to figure out that is one, dangerous, and two, it's going to pollute. And it should be stored safely in a dry lined landfill away from the rivers and water bodies, a safe distance, and separated from the groundwater. The toxins from coal ash, a lot of them stay around forever. For example, arsenic doesn't disappear. It gathers, it's a heavy metal, so it doesn't stay in the water column, it sinks to the bottom. But what we have seen is these sites will keep polluting for decades and centuries if the ash is not removed, and those substances will continue to enter our environment.
What percent of the general public do you think has any idea about how coal ash is stored?
On average, very low. I didn't know anything about it until I started this work, but what we know is the wells around these coal ash sites have problems. There's no reason to put those people at risk from primitive coal ash storage or to put future generations at risk from it, our children and our grandchildren.
In 2008, over 500 million gallons of coal ash were released into the environment when the containment plan failed at a plant in Tennessee. It was the nation's largest coal ash spill, and after effects were felt outside the state's border.
There was a massive coal ash disposal site that was run by the Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA, that had a huge break and spill that contaminated a large area with coal ash. As a result of that, some of that was cleaned up and it was brought to a community in Alabama for disposal. But that's not unusual. In fact, a lot of coal ash is shipped fairly long distances these days. What we see, unfortunately, in environmental justice cases is very often the waste is disposed of in lower income communities, often communities of color. And unfortunately, what we see is in some cases, as in Uniontown, there are real concerns about how the coal ash is disposed of.
Landfills tend to be located in places where they can have, use cheap property values to occupy huge swaths of land, because you know how big landfills are. And so in Alabama alone, because it's less per ton to process waste, there's a lot of landfills there, and a lot of waste goes into Alabama. It becomes the dumping ground for the United States. 26 states send their waste to Alabama. So you have a place like Uniontown, Alabama, which got all of the waste from the Tennessee Valley coal ash spill, which happened in Tennessee and was shipped over to Alabama to this one poor African American community. They had all that coal ash that came there, and the coal ash, it's not very well contained. So they have a coal ash pond that's right next to a catfish pond, and so the stuff from the coal ash goes into the catfish pond. You know, catfish are bottom feeders. All that stuff sinks right down. That's what they're eating. People are fishing that out and eating it for dinner.
I lived in Uniontown my whole 33 years of life.
I was born and raised in Uniontown.
Moved back south in '02. But before I moved back, my friends were, "Oh, you're going south where you get fresh air, fresh water, and quietness." That's the northern thing when you come south. You don't have all the noise, no pollution, and real quiet. But that's not true.
Things started going wrong like in 2007, 8. That's when they started talking about they was bringing coal ash to Uniontown. It was like fear, because we knew that coal ash, it was talked about to be hazardous.
They consulted us, but after the fact. Once they had made their minds up to let coal ash come in, then they let the citizens know what their intentions were. They held a couple of public hearings in the school gym, and basically they got to the point of telling us, well, it's a done deal. How can something be toxic in one place and non-toxic in another place? What I'm saying is, in Kingston, Tennessee, that is a majority white neighborhood. In Uniontown, Alabama, this is majority black neighborhood. And I feel that we have been taken advantage of because of the race differences and the economic differences. I have noticed that the closer I get to the coal ash location, the trees start turning white. I mean, everything in that area is completely white. The houses in that area it looked like it had snow.
And I live within 200 yards of the landfill. And it smelled bad, and you had bulldozers all through the night, and I used to have a well water. I was drinking the water, and then I started breaking out with hives. So we took the water to the health department to have it tested. They sent it to Montgomery, and when I got it back, they said, "Don't drink it."
And we used to live straight across from the landfill. So living in that area and seeing, that huge mountain, and you gotta understand, rural areas, that's where all your vegetables, all your fruit, that's where the cows are at. You can go fishing. See, that's the part about country life people don't seem to understand, rural area, is that where you can fish, you feel like you can just almost do anything, outside life. But all that changed.
They found so many health impacts that they were experiencing in their community. They saw more people developing respiratory illnesses. They saw they've documented to the extent that they think that they might be a cancer cluster, because they've seen rare and more intense forms of cancer developing in their communities. They talk about everything from skin rashes to pets being impacted, and they're seeing how their community is withering.
The problems that we're having in this area that is a great concern of the people. One, is neuropathy. Neuropathy is the nerve damage that takes away the feelings in your leg, takes away the feelings in your hands, and it's difficult to feel what's going on. It's difficult to walk sometimes because of the nerve damage. I have it. 2, sleep apnea. And there are kidney problems here in this city.
My 10-year-old, she have headaches all the time, and she just sleep a lot, and that kind of scared me, why she sleeping a lot, and I took her to the doctor for it, and they said they can't see, why should she be having headaches at 10 years old like that.
I have neuropathy. It's a burning sensation that's in this leg. Not only in this leg, I got in that leg. I've fallen at least 5 times. The things that changed after coal ash came was no gardening, no outside life. I mean, if you did, it was the smell. It was like, should I eat this fruit or shouldn't I?
Before then, the water was some of the best water you ever had. You know, but then all of a sudden it started getting a bad smell, bad odor. And you don't know the results behind this coal ash, so naturally I'm not gonna put my health in jeopardy. So I just buy my water now.
When you're on a fixed income where there are no jobs, you got to pay your light bill, you got to pay your water bill, you got to pay your insurance, you got to pay all these things, and then you got to buy water. You're paying your water bill for water you cannot drink.
Most of the people here in Uniontown buy their own water. Yesterday, I bagged up to my garage door to unload 15 cases of water. And this is what we drink. Those are the only things we can feel safe doing with the water here in town.
So the people in Uniontown have really been at first just beaten down and defeated and then rising up. They put together an organization called the Black Belt Citizens for Health and Justice. And they've really taken back their circumstances and are really pushing for justice. They have been contacting ADEM, the Alabama Department of Environmental Management. They've gotten themselves into the media. They have really started to push back and develop a set of demands that they're pushing forward with in terms of the management of the coal ash. There's a whole slew of issues that they have going on, and they have organized with an action agenda, and they're making strides.
And I am the Black Belt Citizen Fighting for Health and Justice Vice President, where it's a non-profit organization that fights against injustice and trying to better life in my hometown.
For us living in Uniontown, it's kind of rough sometimes. The Black Belt Citizens help me stand up. They go overboard to try to help me meet needs, and I got rights to stand up and, fight for what's right for me and my family.
I have to take my hat off to them because they're fighting up against a brick wall. They're out there in the water by themselves almost.
Who's listening to the concern of poor people? The uneducated people. How do we get the word out that this is so wrong? How do we get the word out we worth living for too? I love Uniontown, and Uniontown didn't always look like this. I mean, we got to give these other people's hope. That's what Black Belt Citizens is about, giving other people's hope, educating them to let them know you have a right to clean water, you have a right to clean air, you have a right to live where you want to live. You don't have to run. Stand up and fight. We have a right to speak.
There's no more basic need for any American than to have water coming out of their tap that's safe to drink. And there's no more basic government duty than to ensure that all of our water is safe.
And we deserve justice. We deserve clean air. We deserve clean water. We deserve all this. And I'm gonna continue to do what we're doing until something happens.
All our effort is about safety. It's about health. It's about concern. But they say we're just being radicals. Radicals for the good.
The combination of ancient technology and social media has amazing results for the planet.
The Waterfront Partnership is a business improvement district that manages the Inner Harbor along the waterfront. And the Waterfront Partnership's job is to make sure that the waterfront is clean, green, and safe, and trying to make the harbor the world-class destination that everyone expects it to be. Once the Waterfront Partnership was cleaning the sidewalks and landscaping for a couple years, they realized the harbor was still filled with trash. So then they started the Healthy Harbor Initiative. And the Healthy Harbor Initiative's mission is to have a swimmable and fishable Baltimore Harbor by 2020. Currently, you ask anyone about the Baltimore Harbor and their first thoughts are dirty, trash, smelly. No one will ever think, I want to take a dip in there.
In general, people aren't aware that they live in a watershed. A watershed is an area of land that all drains to the same point. Whenever it rains, trash that is in alleys, streets, parking lots throughout Baltimore City, that all drains into our waterways and ends up here at the harbor.
I worked on this harbor for 20 years before I came up with this idea. I was working as the director of the Baltimore Maritime Museum, and we have the collection of historic ships in the lighthouse in the harbor. People were coming from all over to visit our ships, and every day I'd hear the same thing. I'd hear the visitors reacting and saying, oh, the trash is awful. So I called the city and I said, you know, we got to do something about the fact that the trash is the first impression of our beautiful harbor. And they said, we're open to ideas. So every day as I walk to and from work, I'd think about what we could do to pick up this trash. And I grew up on a farm, and we had this old antique piece of equipment on the farm that was a hay pitching machine. And you just drove it around the field, and it raked up the hay and put it on a conveyor and pitched it up onto a wagon. And it worked off the power of its wheels as you pulled it behind the tractor. So I thought, you know, we could do the same kind of thing, but instead of pulling it around, we'll leave it in one place, and the water that brings the trash can be our source of power. It's all self-contained power. We have no fossil fuels. We have no hookup to the grids. It's doing the job without creating additional pollution, so it's pretty neat. So the water wheel is ancient technology. For centuries, people have used the power of flowing water to generate mechanical power to power factories or mills, and we're doing the same thing today. The water wheel is the engine for the machine. The fuel for the machine is either the flow of the river or the water being pumped by the solar power that we're generating from our solar panels. So what we're doing is we're turning that solar power, that hydropower, into mechanical energy to power the conveyor and the leaf rakes to pick up the trash. So we have the rakes that scoop the trash up onto the machine, and then the conveyor that picks the trash out of the water and dumps it into the dumpster. Now we have a few other things that we need to power. We have our internet connections, we have our cameras, and they're powered directly off of the solar panels. We have plastic bags, styrofoam cups, plastic bottles, cigarette butts. Anytime there's a rain, it washes it into the storm drains, and the storm drains into little creeks, and little creeks into this river. So a lot of people, when they walk around the harbor and see the trash, they think that people just throw their trash in the harbor, but that's really not where the bulk of it comes from. The bulk of it comes from the stuff that people throw up on the highways and places like that, and it gets washed down here into the harbor. The harbor is sort of the dead end for it.
Mr. Trash Wheel is located at the end of the Jones Falls River. It's a river that goes all the way up to Baltimore County and continues down the very large watershed, and it ends up at this one point. So this river, during a big rainstorm, acts as a funnel. It's the end of a funnel. All of the different tributaries and streams that contribute to the Jones Falls River end up right here. And we'll get a swarm of almost like a beaver dam of plastic bottles and styrofoam. It's pretty staggering.
This is where the trash is most concentrated. Any further upstream, we'd have to go to all the little tributaries. Any further downstream, it's kind of like chasing the cows after they already got out of the barn. If this trash doesn't get picked up here, it goes downstream, out into the harbor, out into the Chesapeake Bay, and out in the ocean. Millions of tons of trash are ending up in our oceans, and it stays there. They're estimating that at some point in the near future, the amount of plastic in the ocean will outweigh the amount of fish in the ocean. After a rain, this dumpster can fill in as little as an hour and a half. And that's 5 tons of trash. That's thousands of styrofoam cups and thousands of plastic bottles, and there's tens of thousands of cigarette butts in there. You know, if that was allowed to just go out in the harbor, it would look like you could walk across this harbor. It'd be completely carpeted in trash. It's making a big difference. I think everybody who works on the harbor, visits the harbor, lives around the harbor, I think they all realize that this thing has made a big dent in the problem.
John Keld is the epitome of that one person can make a difference in your local environment. He had an idea, he partnered with some local companies and the Waterfront Partnership and Baltimore City, and they made this incredible invention happen. And now the idea of it is spreading internationally.
And I actually went out on the device and shot a video with my cell phone and uploaded it to my personal social media account so like my friends and relatives could see this project that we've been working on. Someone picked that up and put it onto the website reddit.com, where it went to #1 over the course of a weekend, and that video received over 1 million views. And so that was really the first time that we realized we had something more than a trash collector.
Our board asked us the question, how do you take this temporary popularity and turn it into sustainable popularity and do something to keep those viewers interested?
So we actually had creative firms come and pitch to us their ideas.
One creative team came up with the idea of putting googly eyes on Mr. Trash Wheel and calling it Mr. Trash Wheel. Before, it was just called the Inner Harbor Water Wheel. So they gave him the googly eyes, gave him a name and a Twitter account, and a really kind of sassy, funny personality that's lovable and curious. I'll be walking along the promenade and little kids will be like, "Mom, Dad, look, it's Mr. Trash Wheel or Mr. Trash Monster." And I'll hear these kids explain how this machine works to their parents. So while Mr. Trash Wheel is incredibly good at picking up trash and debris, he's almost equally as important because he's a spokesperson for environmental awareness in Baltimore City. He has tens of thousands of Twitter followers, Facebook followers, Instagram followers, and we've sold thousands and thousands of t-shirts to help fundraise the operation of the Trash Wheel as well.
One of the great things about the popularity and kind of global success of Mr. Trash Wheel is that it allowed us to crowdfund a second trash wheel. So we received donations from over 30 different states and over a dozen different countries around the world to help us build a second trash wheel here in Baltimore. And her name is Professor Trash Wheel, and she was installed in December of 2016.
When we first created Mr. Trash Wheel's Twitter account, we had no idea how popular he would end up being. All of those people are tuning in every day to see what Mr. Trash Wheel has to say. He captures their attention and gets people who otherwise would not really be interested in the environmental movement, but gets them to act and do real important things locally. There's a live feed of Mr. Trash Wheel at mrtrashwheel.com, and you can watch him 24/7, whether he's just sitting there not doing anything, or if there's a rainstorm coming through Baltimore, you can tune in and watch him eat dumpster after dumpster of garbage, styrofoam and cigarette butts. So we've actually heard from schools in Ecuador, in parts of Europe and throughout the United States of science teachers say they use the live webcam to teach their kids about trash pollution, about the aquatic environment, and also just the idea of an invention, how you can live in your community, see a problem, and then create a solution, find funding, and make it happen, just like John Kellett did. Got a pretty standard trash collection here today. Lots of styrofoam cups, plastic bottles, leaves. See a sneaker in there, and also a backpack. I've never seen a backpack come up the conveyor belt before. One of the most interesting things Mr. Trash Wheel's collected was this high heel stiletto shoe. And we posted it on social media and it got hundreds of likes, probably 500 likes.
One time we had a kayak come up, and we had a guitar come up one time. We get all kinds of sports balls. We get basketballs, footballs, baseballs, softballs, tennis balls. We actually keep a count of how many we get. I think it averages about 20 per dumpster. The nice ones we save and give to some kids, wash them off, bleach them off. We have a camera that we use to monitor the machine and look at what's going on. Late one night, we had a hard rain, and I was looking at the camera, and I said, "What is that?"
One of the weirdest things Mr. Trash Wheels collected was a living ball python snake that would have been native to West Africa. It came down the Jones Falls during a storm and looked for the first thing it could grab onto to get out of the river. So we actually called up the National Aquarium, who sent over their snake wrangler to remove the snake from the trash wheel. And to kind of celebrate that fact, we partnered with a local brewery to create Mr. Trash Wheel's Lost Python Ale, a local beer that actually helps us keep the trash wheel running.
When we were fundraising for the Professor Trash Wheel project, we had amazing community involvement. We had over 500 people donate locally and also internationally to build this trash wheel. And that included a group of little girls hosting a lemonade stand. Since Mr. Trash Wheel was installed in 2014, he's collected over 1 million pounds of trash. And with Professor Trash Wheel, the newest trash wheel, they've collected a cumulative 1.5 million pounds of trash. That includes over 9 million cigarette butts, almost 10 million, hundreds of thousands of plastic bottles, hundreds of thousands of plastic bags, thousands of glass bottles. The numbers are insane. And it's pretty crazy to think that if these trash wheels weren't where they are and weren't collecting the trash, all of that trash would continue on into the bay and into the Atlantic Ocean.
Trash in our waterways isn't just a visual problem. It's not just offensive because we see it, but when that trash makes its way out into the Chesapeake Bay and starts to break down, animals actually start thinking of it as food. And animals eat trash and eat pieces of trash, and it actually gets into the food chain that way. And animals like crabs and fish that humans consume are now eating the plastic that ends up in our rivers. Our long-term goal is to put Mr. Trash Wheel out of business, and the way we do that is by working upstream in communities on behavior change issues. Every year, over 10 million people walk past Mr. Trash Wheel here. People in urban areas need to be connected to their environment as much as anybody else. And that's what the Healthy Harbor Initiative to me is all about, making sure that people in the city of Baltimore can connect in real, tangible ways with their waterways. Whether that means kayaking or following a funny trash wheel on social media or going fishing. I think that's an essential part to living a full and complete life.
It's really rewarding to see a clean harbor, but it's almost more rewarding to see the little kids that come and they get inspired to make a difference, and they think, you know, hey, I can be a part of something that can make the world a better place or make our city a better place. And that's even more rewarding.